Hello, I'm Conrad Carvalho. I'm an art consultant and I'm the prize director for the Ashurst Emerging Artist Prize. I'm also the collections director for the Ashurst Art Collection. My pathway into the arts, it's a complicated one. I started off, going back to when I was 16, I wanted to be, 14, I wanted to be an artist and a scientist and a mathematician. And I had a choice between maths and art GCSE, and I couldn't do both, so I got pushed into science. I can't say pushed, because I did love science. And then when it came to A-level, same thing. Was it maths, further maths, super maths, extra maths, or art? And I picked maths, I was good at it. And since then I was stuck in maths and finance. Eventually I had enough of finance. I was 10 years as a trader, and I wanted to be an art collector and keep my job as a trader, but actually I couldn't. I found it more interesting actually to work with artists rather than just buy a piece of artwork and put it on the wall. So I came up with this idea to set up Oak Tree and Tiger to work with emerging artists in particular. And it went from there. I went into it full time, and I sort of followed that path, which kind of, I say followed the path kind of guided me towards where I am now. I started off representing artists, I started off art dealing, and then moved into corporate art advisory, into where I am now, which is sort of a mixture of all the different things I've done since I started. Yeah, so a little bit about what I'm doing now. Still a mixture of projects. It's all focused on emerging artists and supporting them. So whether it's with my sort of business skills and understanding of collectors and buyers and sort of ways of looking at art and understanding and appreciating and engaging with it, and how I get emerging artists to think about that a bit more and not just paint for themselves, but to paint with the idea of the viewer in mind. And so pretty much all my projects are centered around that, specifically supporting emerging artists and helping what I'd call emerging collectors engage with them and build a relationship, because that for me is what makes art far more interesting. It's not just looking, it's actually participating and engaging with it on every level possible. A good example is the Ashurst Art Collection that I launched in 2019. So we look for really talented emerging artists and we exhibit them. Now the traditional corporate art collection is they buy some artworks, put it on the wall, and it's hidden away from the public. So to compensate for that, I've created a platform that promotes emerging artists. So website, digital marketing, and all the kind of support I can give them. And every year we change the artists. So the collection is more growing. It grows every year. We find new artists to add to that, and we hope to support the artists from the very beginning. And each year as we add. One of the important bits for me is that artists can talk about being in the collection, and they actually have an artwork that has a bit of provenance attached to it now. So they can say that they're in the Ashurst Art Collection in this specific year, and that artwork is now back with them and able to exhibit it and use it to grow their careers and build their reputations as well. And a buyer collector can benefit from that as well and continue that support for the artists that we've hopefully started. I look for new artists in various places, particularly art fairs and a little bit on Instagram, but particularly as I'm the prize director for the Ashurst Emerging Artist Prize, I see more than I need to see from the entries. We get so many entries and covering all types of mediums, all kinds of ideas, all kinds of artists from all over the world. That's my most significant resource. So what stands out of everything I look at and look through artworks and artists are this incredible desire to want to engage with the viewer that opens up questions and ideas, and sometimes you don't see it immediately with the artwork, and sometimes you have to read the artist statement and learn a bit more. But sometimes the work is so interesting and peculiar, or I just feel it, that there's something more to it, and I don't know the answer. So I'm not an art history expert, so I look at something, and if I don't understand it, that's what inspires me a lot. One, not just to figure it out, but to do the research to find out more. So we've now done 6 years of judging, so we've seen over 10,000 artworks by thousands and thousands of artists, and each year things develop. So one thing I do notice is a lot of the art does capture that year, and it does capture it very well. So each year we see current themes developing, and now things have there's been a much bigger focus this year, more than ever, on the environment and how we're treating the planet. There's a little bit more about politics as well. At the beginning it was much more about just your usual sort of art topics and general conceptual ideas, and a lot of figurative work as well. And these coming years it's sort of changed. It's definitely more moved towards the environment. I think that's a big thing. We've also seen a lot more digital or use of new technology, use of new materials. At the beginning it was much more painting, and now it's definitely widened a lot as well. We've got a lot more international entries as well from all over the world. It's been pretty amazing. Iran and South Korea, India, Canada, Germany, Switzerland, Kazakhstan even have entered with some very diverse and interesting work that sometimes captures their own culture and sometimes looks at culture outside of their circle. We get a lot of artists that enter every year, and what's interesting is watching how their work develops and it's not just their technique that's developed. Sometimes it's quite obvious they've actually learnt and studied these techniques, and they've practiced, and that's a real joy to see that they are, sometimes whether we've given them advice or they've watched some of the stuff we've produced, that they've learned from it, and they mention that. Some of them end up going to art school, some of them are self-taught, and you see these artworks develop, and some of them who may not have been shortlisted in the first year they entered, suddenly they're right at the top and they're getting shortlisted. And then there's some artists that change so much they get shortlisted twice. I've taken a different path, so I feel like I'm being a little bit of an artist by being an observer. So some of the highlights from the past 6 years of the prize. Every year it's the shortlist and the prize giving. So it's amazing when for the shortlist we get 25 to 30 artists in a space with their friends and family and supporters and my clients and Ashurst and the sponsors' clients as well, all together. And it's amazing how many amazing connections have been made between these different people, and some of the new points and observations of the artwork that come out, and ideas that I hadn't thought of or the judges hadn't thought of before. So that's been particularly interesting. But the highlight has been the Ashurst move into their new building, where we've now got this brilliant public space to exhibit, and it can be beautifully sectioned off into certain areas, and it's just a very social, large space that's worked brilliantly to present the artworks. And while it's still an office environment, it's much more. It's also an amazing exhibition space as well. So we're really proud that we've got this brilliant space to work with. To mention some of the sort of specific moments as well and it's always been actually these events and also the online work we do for promoting the entrance and the shortlists and the winners. So some of these events we've put together artists who then have formed either a collective or a group, and they've gone and done an exhibition together that was brilliantly successful for them. And whether they worked with other artists, but they've got support from the other artists, and also sharing of opportunities. One artist has gone on to progress really well in the art world and gain a gallery or 2 or 3 art dealers and buyers, and now they're can't call them emerging anymore, which is probably the whole reason for being for the art prize, is to get them from emerging to the next level. And things like that are things that I think are most effective: connections, opportunities, ideas, and skills and tools that they need to learn. And it's been particularly brilliant when an artist writes back to us and says, I started doing what you recommended in one of your talks, one of your blogs, and now I have an Instagram page, and actually someone wanted to buy some work from it, or a curator invited me to exhibit with them. And if I'd never have done that, then I'd be still in my studio on my own, producing work and not talking to people. My biggest piece of advice for entrance is when you're applying to enter, the entry form and everything you put in it is incredibly important. Not just the image of the artwork. That's incredibly important because that's the first thing we look at. Good photograph, well taken, that really shows the artwork as it needs, as close to how you want it to be seen. But also is the text, the artist statement, and any clues you can give us on how to understand and look at your work to guide us, because we can't spend hours and hours looking at it and thinking about it, and we are not seeing it in real life. So thinking about the viewer and not just why you painted it, you should be thinking about, and this is the biggest tip, why should I be interested in the artwork? And following from that tip for entrance, actually for every artist, that's really key. Why should the person be interested in looking at this work and see the work is probably the best way to put it. You know, how can you educate them to understand it better or have a chance of connecting with it? That's incredibly important, I think. So looking back at everything we've done over the last 6 years for the Art Prize, one of the key themes has been online presence and the digital world and how important that is. And it gets more important each year. Every year gets bigger and not necessarily easier, but it's a brilliant resource. And it means that you don't need anything but yourself and time to promote yourself and connect with your audience and develop your own career. You don't need the gallerist, you don't need an art dealer, you don't need to be represented. You can do it yourself. And collectors, buyers, curators, they're all on these platforms, and from my circle, a lot of them use these resources to discover artists. And then it leads on to the offline stuff. It means that it's really important to have a website. It's really important to have an Instagram profile. It used to be Facebook, maybe it used to be Twitter, but it's much more Instagram more than ever before. Having a newsletter is maybe important too, but your key resource is the website. Your next key resource is the Instagram. And there's lots of free resources to help you manage those as well. It may take time, that's the thing. It takes your time to do it, but it's incredibly important and useful. And the importance for me, for a good emerging contemporary artist, is connecting with your audience. And with these tools, you can do that brilliantly well. But don't lose sight of the importance of offline, of holding exhibitions. You're producing artwork that needs to be seen in person. Online, you can see it quite well. You can help get that initial attention, that initial inspiration, that spark of interest. But you need to turn that into getting them to come and see you and the artwork. That's really important. So think about how that all fits in together. But for me, exhibitions are the most important thing. What the art world needs more of is, there's more than enough empty walls. It needs more buyers. It needs more enthusiasm for filling those empty walls with art. And rather than leave them blank and uninteresting, there needs to be some urge to get these people to buy more for sure. There's more than enough art out there. There's lots of artists. And I think that would help a lot. Funding, of course, if there was more funding, that would be fantastic. The creative industries is a big driver, especially in the UK, of the economy, more now than ever before. And as things, as artificial intelligence and robots take over everything else, that just leaves the creative stuff for us humans. And the more we can build it up now, the better.